Fox News host Charles Payne went after one of his co-hosts, Jessica Tarlov, for what he perceived as playing down Biden's dislike of MAGA and Americans that support former President Trump. Let's take a look.
Biden's anger and vitriol and hatred for MAGA is far more worse than President Trump's individual battles with someone who crosses him. That is something that is really detrimental to this country, that the President of the United States despises half of the United States. President Biden, I said earlier today, about a week ago, I had a segment coming up, so I Googled Biden hates MAGA. Nothing but articles after articles after articles. He has expressed hatred for half of the country. Who's
writing those articles?
It doesn't matter.
And it's not.
Because the bottom line is he says it. He has vitriol for them. And so does MSNBC, and so does CNN, and so does the New York Times. They have vitriol for half of the nation. They don't look at them like fellow Americans, and it's unfortunate. They try to paint them as racist. That all the things that they do to their fellow Americans who simply want a safe home, a safe community, for the children to have prosperity. They want the same thing, but they demean them all the time.
Okay, so I went back and pulled up the language that Biden used in that, I think it was a State of the Union address that was criticized on these lines. And I think a lot of Republicans tried to make it into his basket of deplorables moment. I'm not sure.
Well, that was Hillary Clinton. Oh, I see what. Yes, try to make it as akin to Hillary's. Yeah,
I don't think it quite landed. Here's what Biden said. He said, MAGA forces are determined to take this country backward to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. That seems like a much more specific attack on policies that are advanced by Donald Trump, who describes his movement and his campaigns as MAGA. That's a branding exercise from Donald Trump. Now, I understand the political motive to try to expand that, I think, pretty discreet policy criticism to everyone who's ever voted for Donald Trump. And in some ways, every politician from one party is making a policy critique that tacitly touches everyone who's ever voted for the other party. But Biden actually, I think, has stayed away from making the kind of statements that are totalizing and essentializing, like you're a terrible person for ever having voted for Donald Trump. I have a lot of criticisms for him. I don't think that this is one of them.
Yeah, when he definitely does describe MAGA as a threat to the country, but he is talking about a set of policy prescriptions that he thinks are bad. I don't know that it's quite saying that Donald Trump's voters are bad. I mean, some of the imagery and a lot of the imagery in the campaign advertisements so far that focus on MAGA are, specifically will feature people from Charlottesville or people from January 6th, that kind of thing, which, is a small subset of individuals. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite the same thing. Now, I think a lot of his acolytes or a lot of, talking head type people are far less cautious on that front 100%. And lean totally into they're all deplorables and they're all racist and there's nothing we can do and we're screwed because there's so many of them.
He even specifically carved out folks in the speech. He said not even a majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans, and that is a threat to this country. Yeah. I mean, he seemed to really anticipate the criticism and just not go there. So I don't know that I agree with that particular blow up.
Yeah, I think it was a little stronger than is warranted by what, and what Jessica Tarlov was trying to say, well, if you Google it, it just comes up people like you saying that. That's not really exactly evidence. It's not the same. Hillary Clinton was a lot more, had a total lack of caution when describing half the country, and was, again, very embittered after her loss, chalking up to Russians and all of that kind of stuff.
Or Mitt Romney's comment, too. I mean, I think we have learned the 47% makers and takers comment. I think that folks have learned from those gaffes about not being overly broad. But apparently, the commentariat has also learned that you can be so damaged by being overly broad that they will take a statement that was not overly broad and try to characterize it.
I also don't know that the distinction he was trying to draw with Donald Trump there, that Donald Trump only directs malice and hatred and intense emotions towards specific individuals, not entire classes of people. I mean, maybe, but I don't know if that's that sounded like
not plausible.
Like a very that was some coping there.
SHIT whole countries.
Yeah.
Calling all of his political opponents every inventive name in the book, the sanctimonious, meatball.
Well, those are individual. I mean, that was Charles Payne was saying.
Sure.
It's against specific people.
There's a very specific kind of critique that is being levied against Nikki Haley and her supporters. It's not quite the same, but these are rhinos, these are Democrats. I mean, if you really want to push it, we could make an argument that a lot of people are not embodying the spirit of a president who's supposed to be the president of all people. I mean, that argument can be made. But I don't think anyone's really going to go out on a limb and say, no, Donald Trump is the most gracious, inviting, inclusive president we've ever had.
Right. Yeah, there's frustration about that, just in inner Republican stuff that I've seen, like DeSantis people complain. Like, Trump could say every negative thing or every bad word in the dictionary about DeSantis, and DeSantis can't do the same bad. And if DeSantis said even 1% as harsh to Trump, people would be like, "How dare you demonize and hurt the feelings of our precious dear leader?"
Right.
Trump has managed to enforce a double standard on that is. Frankly, just impressive.
And that's what Biden was saying in this speech. That the Republican Party is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump. Where's the lie?
But whatever he's doing is working because he's way ahead in the polls, and he seems at this moment somewhat likely to be our next president. I'm coming to terms with this. I was like, maybe the polls will turn around. I mean, they still could. Obviously, there's a lot of time, but Biden is just so far down, and I'm getting. It's becoming harder for me to picture him pulling it out. Well,
look, this isn't the end of this story. When Democrats went out on attack after Trump made this gaffe, confusing Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi on the New Hampshire campaign stage.
Never reports the crowds, By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. Nikki Haley, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything? Deleted and destroyed all of it. All of it. Because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people.
Now, in the course of roasting Trump, Nancy Pelosi actually made a similar mistake.
Well, let me just say I'm not going to spend too much time on Donald Trump's cognitive disorders. But what I am going to say, and I want to, in friendship, say to Chris, he tried to say that Nikki Haley did not allow the National Guard to come, but it was Nancy Pelosi. It was nobody. It was Donald Trump.
Now, Republicans are trying to say, well, Nancy Pelosi is also cognitively impaired because she, for a second, said Joe instead of Donald Trump. I gotta say, again, am no fan of Nancy Pelosi, but the character of just switching somebody's name up is not the same thing as going on a protracted minute-long rant the way that Donald Trump did.
Roxanne Gay
exactly.
retire as president of Harvard.
Exactly. Switching a name. But Donald Trump was talking about a person that had authority on a day in a very specific context and superimposing his present political opponent onto a set of actions that he wanted to criticize in a way that's difficult to understand. So it's like, I might call you the wrong name, but I'm not going to confuse you with my mom. I'm not going to say, Robby, when you gave birth to me in 1985. That's a different kind of error, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're all very old. They're all
That's
very
true.
old.
That is true.
They're all,
that
and
is
we
true.
don't want to. I don't want to throw stones at a glass house because we get names confused all the time.
All the time.
It's an intense 3 hours we spend every day talking about the news, but
do you think that's what happened with Trump? That he got a name confused when he's saying that?
I think he has Nikki Haley on the brain because he's so mad at her right now, and so his brain substituted her name. Even though he was supposed to be inveighing against Nancy Pelosi, he couldn't help himself but say Nikki Haley because that is the object of his ire right now.
But I thought he was inveighing against Nikki I thought he was talking about, he was in a campaign speech, in a campaign posture, talking about Nikki Haley, and then said, well, my opponent, Nikki Haley, did all this other bad stuff that Nancy Pelosi did.
I don't know. Look, they're all... Nikki Haley, as she said, a choice no one wants. Biden and Trump, very old. Nancy Pelosi, not in leadership anymore. Old as well. We're governed by. I don't dislike the elderly.
I mean, look, all I'll say is I don't think it's just age, because I think there are a lot of politicians who are older, and I think they should maybe step aside so that we can have new, fresh air in the party, but are not in cognitive decline. I don't think Bernie Sanders is in cognitive decline. I don't think Chuck Schumer is in cognitive decline. I don't think, there's a lot of people who aren't in cognitive decline. But I do think that there is a double standard that is worth pointing out. That if Joe Biden had been on a stage talking about, well, he would never acknowledge that there's anybody running against him in a primary, but let's just say hypothetically, let's say he was talking about RFK Jr. and how RFK Jr. was going to be a spoiler, and then started blaming RFK Jr. for January 6th and giving a big speech at the Capitol that made everybody go to the Capitol on January 6th like he was Donald Trump. People would be like, oh my God, this guy has lost it.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump, he makes gaffes, but they're just not characterized the same way in the media, rightly or wrongly.
Fair enough. All right, we will have more Rising right after this.